What would you do if you found a barefoot 12-year-old girl in the middle of a storm, clutching two freezing babies in her arms, and she begged you not to call the police? This isn't just a story of survival. It's the story of a child who ran from the man who should have protected her and into the arms of complete strangers who changed everything. But just when she thought she was safe, a knock at the gate shattered that illusion. And what followed next left even a billionaire speechless. Why did her father risk everything to get her back? What secret did he try to bury? And when a new twist is revealed in court, will Sophie finally find peace or lose everything again? Stay with us, because what happens next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family, safety, and love. The city never truly sleeps, but at 3:17 a.m., Seattle was quieter than usual. The streets shimmered with rain, the storm clouds low and heavy, swallowing the skyline. Wind howled through the trees of Greenwood City Park like a warning, and under the flickering glow of a broken street lamp, a child staggered forward barefoot, soaked to the skin, cradling two shivering babies in her arms. 12-year-old Sophie Miller had reached her limit. Her legs were weak, her arms numb, her thoughts hazy from hunger and exhaustion. Ben and Noah, her twin baby brothers, whimpered softly, their lips turning pale from the cold. Their cries had faded from desperation to silence, and that terrified her more than anything. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. The babies were down to half a bottle of formula, split between two chip containers she'd salvaged from a trash bin. Her jacket was gone, traded for formula, her shoes too. And her father? He wasn't chasing her anymore. Not because he'd given up, but because he didn't need to. He always found her. Always. What had driven her to flee through the storm in the middle of the night? What had happened in that house so terrifying, so final that Sophie would rather risk death in the streets than spend one more night under her father's roof? A sharp gust of wind made her stumble. Her knees hit the pavement hard, but she didn't cry out. She couldn't. She had no tears left. Behind a rusted swing set, half swallowed by overgrown bushes, she found temporary shelter. She placed the babies on her torn backpack, wrapped them in what was left of a blanket, and fed them the final drops of formula with shaking hands. "Just a little longer," she whispered, more to herself than to them. "I'll figure something out. I always do, right?" But she didn't believe it this time. She curled herself around them, arms forming a trembling shield, back pressed against a tree. The moment her eyelids dropped, sleep pulled her under, hard and fast. She never heard the tires on wet pavement. She never saw the sleek black Tesla slow to a stop. She didn't even stir when Daniel Walker, a billionaire CEO known for his ruthlessness in boardrooms and emotionless interviews, slammed the car door and ran toward the collapsed figures. He expected a body, maybe a drug overdose, but as he drew closer, what he saw made him stop dead in his tracks. A girl, no shoes, rain-soaked and bruised, curled around two infants like a soldier fallen in battle. One baby coughed weakly, the other didn't move. "Jesus," Daniel whispered, pulling off his coat and kneeling beside them. "What the hell happened to you?" He gently tried to lift the girl, but her arms wouldn't release the babies. Even unconscious, her body refused to let go. He scooped up all three. Inside the car, the heater blasted as he fumbled to call home. The line rang twice before Grace, his wife and former pediatric nurse, answered. "Daniel, it's almost 4 a.m. I need you to get the guest room ready. Blankets, warm water, formula if we have any." "What? What happened?" "I found 3 kids. A girl, maybe 12. 2 infants. Something's very wrong, Grace. Very wrong." By the time Daniel reached the Walker estate, a glass and wood modern mansion nestled at the edge of the forest, the entire house was alive. Grace stood at the door, barefoot in a robe, eyes wide. "Bring them in, now." While Daniel laid the babies on the couch, Grace went straight to work. Vitals, wounds, hypothermia signs. Sophie's feet were torn and infected. One of her arms was bruised from wrist to elbow. She flinched even in her sleep. "This girl's been hurt," Grace whispered. "A lot." As dawn crept in, golden light filtered through the windows. Sophie stirred, and instantly everything changed. Her eyes flew open, her body jolted upright. "Where are they?" she cried. wild-eyed and shaking. "They're safe," Grace said gently, pointing to the bassinets nearby. "Your brothers?" Sophie nodded slowly. "Ben and Noah. You're safe too." But Sophie didn't relax. Her arms crossed tightly. Her voice cracked. "Are you calling the police?" Daniel and Grace exchanged a look. "Not yet," Daniel said quietly. "First we listen." So they did. They listened to a story of grief, violence, and survival that would change everything. A dead mother. A father named Derek Miller who lost himself in bottles and rage. Screams in the night. Flying glass. Baby Ben wrenched from Sophie's arms in a drunken fit. Her instinct to run kicking in. Finally, too late, just in time. "I had to go," she whispered. "I had to protect them." Grace's hand closed around hers. "You already did." But Sophie shook her head, eyes filled with dread. "He's going to come looking." Daniel's jaw clenched. "If he does, he'll answer to me." But could a man like Derek really be stopped that easily? What happens when a nightmare doesn't end, but follows you home? What kind of darkness forces a child to become the only line of defense between her brothers and a monster? And most of all, when a billionaire opens his doors to a stranger, does he know what he's really inviting in? And you? What would you do if you found a child like Sophie in a storm, clutching two babies? Do you believe Sophie was right to run, or should she have asked for help sooner? What kind of man do you think Daniel Walker really is? Cold and calculating, or about to become something more? The storm outside may have passed, but the real danger is just getting started. The Walker estate had never been so quiet. After Sophie told her story, the air inside the house changed. It was no longer a mansion. It was a shelter, fragile, temporary, like a candle in the wind. Daniel and Grace watched the girl move with haunting precision. She didn't just care for her brothers. She studied the room, listened for sounds outside the window, memorized exits. This wasn't a child. This was someone who had learned to survive by preparing for the worst, and the worst was coming. Grace called in her longtime friend, Dr. Laura Whitman, a pediatric specialist who often worked with child abuse survivors. When she arrived that morning, the tension in the room was palpable. She examined the twins first, then Sophie. After several quiet moments, she closed her folder. "They're malnourished," she said, "but the fact that they're still alive? That's because of her. She's been raising them alone, better than most adults I've seen." Grace looked at Sophie, who sat stiffly across the room, holding Ben in one arm while rocking Noah with her foot. "She's a warrior," Grace whispered, "but no one should have to be at that age." Daniel agreed, which is why he did what he always did when facing a threat. He prepared. He called in a private security firm. He had cameras installed, reinforced the gates, upgraded the alarm system. But none of that mattered when the intercom buzzed just after noon. "Delivery?" the housekeeper guessed. Daniel checked the screen and froze. There, pacing outside the gate, was a man with bloodshot eyes and a voice like gravel, soaked in whiskey. Derek Miller. "Let me in," he shouted. "I know you have my kids." Grace caught the look on Daniel's face and rushed to grab Sophie. But the moment Sophie heard the voice crackle through the speaker, she froze. Her entire body stiffened, then trembled. "That's him," she whispered. "He found us." Panic filled the room like a tidal wave. "Take the babies upstairs," Daniel ordered. "Lock the nursery." Sophie clutched Ben tightly. "Please, don't let him take them. He always said no one would stop him, not even the law." But Daniel was already heading to the gate. Derek leaned toward the camera, wild-eyed. "You rich people think you can steal from me? They're mine." Daniel pressed the speaker button. "They're not property. They're children, and you'll never touch them again." Derek's lips twisted into a smile. "We'll see about that." He backed away into a rusted pickup, but something in his eyes, calm, calculating, unsettled Daniel. This wasn't over, not even close. That night, the Walker household remained tense. Grace filed for an emergency restraining order. Security finished installing cameras, but the motion sensors wouldn't activate until morning. Sophie sat by the window, knees tucked to her chest, watching the trees sway in the wind. "He's going to come back," she said quietly. Grace placed a warm hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll be ready." Sophie didn't move. "You don't know him like I do. He waits. He watches." And she was right. Just after midnight, a storm rolled in. Rain slammed against the windows. Thunder echoed through the hills. And deep in the shadows behind the estate, a figure moved. He slipped past the unfinished sensor line. He cut the backup generator Daniel had meant to secure the next day. Then he slipped through the rear door, unlocked. Upstairs, Sophie jolted awake. Not from a nightmare, from instinct. She crept to the nursery. The wind blew the curtains wildly. The window was wide open, and Noah's crib was empty. Her scream tore through the house. Daniel and Grace bolted from bed. Sophie stood frozen, barefoot, soaked in sweat, pointing at the window. "He took him," she whispered. "He took Noah." Daniel sprinted for the security monitors. Grace grabbed Sophie and Ben, holding them close while dialing 911 with shaking hands. Daniel watched the screen. There, 2:37 a.m., Derek, drenched from the storm, slipping through the gate. He wasn't running. He wasn't trying to escape. He was still on the property. "Grace," Daniel yelled, "I think he's still here." But Sophie was already moving. She ran barefoot through the rain, down the back steps, her nightgown soaked within seconds. Her breath came in gasps, but she knew exactly where to look. The garden shed, the place she and the twins had once hidden during her father's worst rages. The door creaked open, and there he was, Derek Miller, crouched on the floor, cradling Noah in his arms. His eyes were unfocused. His lips moved without sound. Then he spoke. "She looks just like her, your mother. She left me, but you're still mine." Sophie's voice was steady. "Put him down." Derek turned, eyes blazing. "You think these people care about you? You think they'll keep you forever?" Behind Sophie, Daniel appeared, soaked and furious. "You made your last mistake," he said coldly. Derek tightened his grip on Noah. Then, a soft cry. Noah stirred in his arms. That sound, that innocent, fragile sound, cracked something inside Derek. Just enough. Sophie leapt forward, snatching Noah. Daniel tackled Derek to the ground. Within minutes, sirens filled the air. Police arrived. Derek was arrested, screaming into the night as he was dragged away in cuffs. Sophie didn't speak. She just held Noah tighter, shielding him from the storm. Some battles end in silence. Others begin the moment you believe you're finally safe. What do you think drove Derek to follow them all the way to the estate? Do you think Sophie knew this moment would come? Was she more prepared than anyone realized? If you were Daniel, would you have confronted Derek head-on or waited for the police? The rain had stopped, but the storm wasn't over. At sunrise, the Walker estate was flooded with flashing lights and quiet tension. Officers moved carefully through the backyard, collecting evidence. Inside, the house felt still, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see if the nightmare was truly gone. In the guest room, Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor, cradling baby Noah in her arms. His tiny chest rose and fell against hers. Beside her, Grace held Ben, whispering a lullaby she hadn't sung since her own sister passed away. Daniel stood by the window, phone in hand, speaking quietly to the police chief. The words restraining order, full custody, and pending charges kept surfacing. But Sophie barely heard any of it. Her mind was still in the shed, still hearing her father's voice, slurred and broken, calling her mine. Still feeling that terrifying moment when she thought he might vanish with Noah into the night, and no one would believe her story. And now? Now he was in custody. But for how long? Grace knelt in front of her. "Sophie, he can't hurt you anymore." Sophie didn't look up. "He said that once before, too." Daniel came over, crouched down. "We're going to court, and we're not going to stop until the law recognizes what we already know. That you're not just a survivor. You're a protector, a sister, and maybe," he pulled something from behind his back, "a manila folder. Maybe something more." She took it with shaking hands. Inside, guardianship papers. Not temporary, not probationary. This was adoption. "You want me?" she whispered. "For real?" "Not just you," Grace said gently, nodding toward the twins. "All three of you, if you'll let us." Sophie's voice cracked. "But I'm not easy. I'm a mess." Daniel smiled. "Then we'll be a beautiful mess together." For the first time, Sophie cried without fear. Not from pain, from being chosen. 3 weeks later, the courtroom was packed with hushed murmurs and hopeful eyes. The judge reviewed the documents slowly, peering at Sophie, who sat beside Grace and Daniel, her arms around both boys. "You understand what this means?" the judge asked. "Yes," Sophie said, standing a little straighter. "It means I finally have a real family." The gavel came down. Sophie Walker. The name felt strange and perfect. Back at the estate, Grace had planned a quiet lunch. Instead, the kitchen exploded with balloons, candles, and a giant cake with one word scrawled across it in blue frosting: home. But just as everyone began to settle into the joy of it all, a knock came at the front door. Not urgent, not angry, just unexpected. Daniel opened it, prepared for anything. Almost. Standing there, umbrella in hand, was Dr. Marcus Hale, a child protection attorney from the state's Family Services Division. His face was calm but unreadable. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," he said, "but something came across my desk this morning." Daniel stepped aside, letting him in. "What is it?" He pulled out a thin document, handed it to Grace. "It's about Sophie's biological grandparents, her mother's side." Sophie's breath caught. "I didn't think I had any." "Well," Marcus said, "they didn't either, until they saw the news reports. They live in Vermont. They've been searching for her since the funeral, but were cut off by Derek. He never told them she had taken the boys. He said they were placed in foster care." Silence filled the room. Then Marcus added, "They're requesting visitation." Daniel's jaw tightened. Grace glanced at Sophie. And Sophie? She was already walking toward the window, holding both boys by the hand. She stared out into the trees, into the quiet, into the unknown. After everything she'd fought through, after finally finding safety, love, and a place to belong, what now? Would this new twist open a door to healing or to more pain? Should she meet them? Trust them? Would it feel like betrayal or something that her mother might have wanted? Her hand tightened around Noah's. Grace stepped beside her. "This is your decision, Sophie, and we'll be right beside you no matter what you choose." Sophie looked at her. "Then I think I want to meet them." Sikru. But deep down, another question lingered. What if not all wounds are ready to be reopened? Questions for the audience. If you were Sophie, would you choose to meet the grandparents you never knew, or protect the peace you just found? Do you think Derek's actions were born out of pain or power? And does that change how responsible he is? And how do you define a real family? Is it blood, or is it the people who show up and never leave? What did you think of Sophie's journey so far? Did it move you, shock you, make you feel something? If this story touched you, comment 3 below. If it wasn't what you expected, comment 1. And if you're somewhere in the middle, comment 2. Also, let us know what country you're watching from. We'd love to know where in the world this story is reaching hearts. And don't forget to share it with someone who believes family isn't defined by blood, but by love, choice, and courage.